The classroom echoed with laughter as the brilliant professor wrote a complex equation on the board, one he claimed only a genius could solve. Students stared blankly, whispering among themselves when he suddenly turned and joked, "Solve this equation, and I'll marry you." The room erupted with laughter until the janitor, quietly sweeping in the back, stopped and looked up. His eyes met the professor's, calm but sharp. For years he'd cleaned those halls, invisible to everyone, his intelligence buried beneath a mop and uniform. That day something changed. As the laughter continued, he picked up a piece of chalk and began writing. The sound of chalk against the board silenced the room. Line by line, symbol by symbol, he solved what no one else could. When he stepped back, the board was complete, and the same professor who mocked him seconds ago now stood frozen, speechless, and pale. His name was Samuel Reed, a man whose story had been forgotten by time. Once a promising mathematician, he lost everything after his family tragedy forced him to drop out of university. Years later, life brought him back to the same halls, but not as a student or scholar, as a janitor. Every night, he cleaned classrooms filled with equations he once loved, the smell of chalk and ink reminding him of the dreams he'd buried. Professor Allen, a man known for his arrogance, never saw him as anything more than a worker in the background. But Samuel listened. He remembered. Each formula, each lecture, every number, they still lived in his mind. When the professor made that joke, it wasn't just disrespect, it was the spark that reignited a fire inside him. And that fire was about to remind everyone in that room that brilliance has no title and no uniform. The students' laughter slowly faded as Samuel approached the board. His hands were rough from years of cleaning, but they moved with the precision of a master. Every stroke of chalk carried confidence, every equation connected flawlessly. The professor, at first amused, folded his arms and smirked, certain the janitor would embarrass himself. But when Samuel began breaking down the problem, step by step, the professor's smile faded. The numbers aligned perfectly, the logic sharp and elegant. Students leaned forward, their whispers replaced by awe. Halfway through, Samuel paused, wiped his hands, and continued with even greater clarity. The entire board filled with formulas so intricate that even the brightest students couldn't follow. Finally, he drew a line under the final number and circled the answer, a result so precise that even the professor couldn't deny it. The silence that followed was deafening. Professor Allen blinked, stepped closer, and stared at the solution as if seeing something impossible. This can't be right," he stammered. Samuel simply handed him the chalk. "Check it," he said calmly. The professor reworked the steps, his trembling fingers retracing Samuel's logic, only to find that every single line was correct. The very equation he had claimed unsolvable stood solved before his eyes by the man he had mocked. The room burst into gasps and murmurs, some students even clapping quietly. Samuel turned to leave, but the professor stopped him. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Samuel smiled faintly. "Someone you never looked at long enough to know." He placed the chalk on the desk and walked out, his head held high. That night, the story spread across the campus like wildfire. Social media caught the moment from a student's phone camera, and within hours, millions had seen the video. The world cheered for the janitor who humbled the arrogant professor. The university dean called an emergency meeting not to punish but to honor. They discovered Samuel's academic past, his unfinished PhD, his exceptional grades, and his unmatched mathematical talent. The man everyone had overlooked was suddenly the talk of every classroom, news outlet, and scientific community across the country. Weeks later, Samuel stood on the same stage where he had once mopped the floor. This time he wore a suit, not a uniform. The dean introduced him as the university's newest lecturer in advanced mathematics. The applause thundered through the hall, but Samuel's eyes searched for one face, the professor sitting silently in the front row, humbled and ashamed. As Samuel began his first lecture, he looked directly at him and said, "The greatest equations in life aren't solved on a board. They're solved when you learn to respect what you don't understand." The students erupted in applause. The same walls that once heard laughter at his expense now echoed with respect for his name. Samuel didn't just solve an equation, he solved his own story. And as he walked off the stage, every person in that hall knew one truth. Never underestimate the quiet mind that listens while others laugh.